Sean Foley not guilty of first-degree murder, and the jury threw up their hands as to the second-degree lesser included and said, Judge, we can't figure this out. So Lise Wheel is with me, former federal prosecutor. Also joining us now is Latonia Hines, a prosecutor. I have overwhelmed here by prosecution. I'm not defensive, though. Latonia, let me ask you, when this case first came about, it might have seemed maybe like it was cut and dry, especially if you had heard the 911 call with Sean Foley's crazy-sounding voice, but then he took the stand. Jury couldn't figure out what to do with this. Ultimately, not guilty on first degree, hung on second. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, he seemed definitely kind of a meek person in comparison, especially when you hear about the victim and the victim's height and weight and all of those things. And plus, I think also the testimony of his girlfriend, I think that the jury just had a hard time because obviously this was a very, very, I don't know how to say it better, kind of twisted relationship that was going on with the girlfriend and her so-called stepfather. I mean, obviously there has been molestation that had gone on for years, and I think the jury just had a really hard time. When he appeared on that stand, he did not seem like the person in the 911 call.
Yeah, and so you have to wonder, you know, who's the real Sean Foley? Maybe it's somewhere in between the two. Lise, let me ask you, the jury came up with a question not long before this verdict. The verdict was after about 12 hours, but 11 in. They were asking for a further definition of reasonable belief that you're in danger, meaning in the self-defense context, what is a reasonable belief? Right. And of course, the judge and the attorneys went, here's the instruction. Do with it what you will. And they came back almost immediately with this, hey, we can't figure it out. Were you surprised?
No, because I think that they were thinking, first of all, they had to get through the first degree. And I think that took them a while. And it should have taken them a while because the fact that he made the taping and the fact that he made the threat, to me, I think the prosecution had a case for first degree. Because as we've said, it doesn't take long to make the premeditation for first degree. So was it overreaching for the prosecution to go for first degree? I don't think so. It is overreaching when you look at that picture of him, right? So when you look at that picture of him, you think, what in the heck was the prosecution doing in making a first degree, a motion for first degree? But I think the jury probably struggled with that. So when they got through struggling with that, then they came to second degree. And then they went to the judge and said, what do we do with that? What is a reasonable belief? And the judge coming back and saying, hey, you got to figure that out. I think at that point, honestly, that jury was exhausted.
Oh, yeah. I was also surprised that they didn't give a more, like a dynamite charge, as it were.
Right.
It was very limp-wristed,
right,
you guys can't come up with it. Okay, forget it. Let's just call it a mistrial.
Right.
Okay, let's go down to the cross-examination. You think Sean Foley was a little, misty and wobbly on direct? Look at him on cross. Here's Sean Foley. Okay, paranoid much? That's Sean Foley on cross-exam explaining how he just tapes everything. First because of employment situation, and then somebody recommended, hey, do it all the time, and so he did. Latonia, how important was it to show this history that this guy seems to record anything and everything just to cover his butt at some point if necessary?
It's very, very important, especially for the defense, because it shows that he wasn't being premeditated. This is just his normal course of action, and so that he wasn't doing anything that he doesn't normally do. And I think also what you notice about him on cross-examination, he seemed believable. He didn't seem like a cold, calculated killer. He seemed like somebody who was in his 20s who was presented with something that was very upsetting. And you've got to remember, you've got this victim who's at 40-something years old, and it's very hard to find, I guess on some level, some bit of sympathy when you start hearing the information about what this victim had been doing with the girlfriend. It was a very complicated case for the jury to have to listen to.
Yeah, there were, I think, two huge factors for this jury, Lise. One, a not so likable victim, and a very sympathetic defendant. What do you think?
Yes, but they didn't acquit either on the second degree because he went and got a gun and he shot him 8 times, and bang, 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 as we heard the prosecution, bang, 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 bang. Does that cohere with self-defense? and the 911 call afterwards. So I think there were some jurors who sat there and said in the jury room, I love how I'm just putting myself in the jury room
why
for
not?
all this.
Yeah.
I mean, thank you for letting me do that. This is fun. Come on. That's an act, this kid. Really?
And at least one person
everything.
said, yeah, the guy felt threatened. And he knew what this victim had done to his girlfriend.
That's why they said
that's exactly what I think.
A mistrial.
Yeah, on
right.
a close call, I think a lot of the facts get watered down with sympathy. And I think that's maybe what happened here.
Right.
And they felt more sympathetic for the defendant than the victim.
But there were certainly some of them who felt for the prosecution that, wait a second, all of those shots, he brought a gun, he taped this, he threatened this guy, he was the one who escalated this.
Hey, I think if he doesn't take the stand, it's a different outcome.
Absolutely. Absolutely. 100%.
And very rarely can you say that.
100%.
When the defendant takes the stand. In this case, it seemed to pay off. There were some sketchy folks in this whole scenario. It was Shakespearean. It was just weird. One of the key players, the girlfriend of Sean Foley, who was in the center of this storm. Sean didn't do anything. Sean was trying to protect me. That is audio of Miranda Goddard when she was in the back seat of the police car almost immediately after this incident took place. And I'll tell you what, it contradicted some of the things she said on the stand. Certainly powerful. Lease Wheel, how important was that?
Well, that certainly helps. I mean,
you think? Yeah. I mean, that is gut-wrenching.
That really helps. I mean, because you've got it right there at the scene.
Why would she contradict herself later?
That
I don't get that.
doesn't make sense.
What's the upside to that? Latonia, do you have any insight on
what I'm
why would she,
with.
Change her testimony to suggest either A, she didn't remember, which she was called on later, or that it was more pro Jimmy Shelton and against her ex-boyfriend?
Right.
Because it's almost kind of like, I don't want to say like a Stockholm syndrome or anything like that, but I mean, she's obviously a very troubled individual, and the relationship she had with Jimmy was a very twisted type of relationship, which obviously began in a very awful way for somebody who was young as she was, for him to have used his age and authority over her. I think what we always say is that usually the reason why we like 911 calls or when we get statements right then when an incident happened is because more times than not, you're getting the more true, credible reaction from the person. And that seems more of the credible reaction. She seemed kind of detached during her testimony. It was very interesting. I think, like we've all been talking about, everybody in this scenario, whether or not you call it Shakespearean or what, they all have, I don't want to call it abnormal, but it's different. They have come from different situations that most people don't go through, and I think the way that they react to it or how they survive through them is different.
Yeah, Latonia, you're right. You're being way too kind. I think they're damaged, all in various ways, and it leads to this bizarre dynamic between them. Let's listen to, you talked about Miranda being detached. Let's listen to the cross-examination of Miranda Goddard. This is where I need a shrink. I need a shrink often, but this is where I really need one. This is, in my head I'm thinking, why would she change her testimony to conflict with what she said contemporaneous with the event, unless she has some sort of weird connection to Jimmy Shelton that is born of this molestation, so that she feels now after the fact he's dead, Sean's alive, and her allegiance kind of shifts to the guy that's now dead.
But that doesn't make sense. You'd think it would shift to the guy that's alive, right, to protect him. He is her boyfriend after all.
Well, yeah, I guess. I don't know, to be honest, really. Was he, or was he just a guy that she used for other purposes? She used Jimmy Shelton when she needed him for things. And maybe that was true of Sean Foley as well.
Trading a car at the time, apparently.
Yeah, sex for things.
Sex for, for a car, whatever. But you do, I do agree that you have to believe what she said in the back of the car right after the incident more, because that's coming right at the time. And those words about he was just trying to protect me, I think that's going to resonate more with the jury than what she says kind of could be made up, and whoever she's alliance and Stockholm
she's sitting there, it's
or
more,
whatever. prepared and all of that.
Yeah.
So I think that does resonate more with the jury, that he was, but also her perspective, who knows what's going through his mind, as opposed to, it's not what's going through her mind, remember, that's important for a legal test. It's what's going through the defendant's mind.
Right. And Latonia, let me ask you, as you know, the prosecution weighs its options, are they going to retry on the second-degree murder?
I think they're going to evaluate it and see whether or not they want to go back and go forward with it. I think they probably will. Like Liz was saying, it wasn't an acquittal. You know, they obviously had something there where they thought that maybe we could find, but they couldn't be all unanimous with it. I think also, too, just going back to what Lisa was saying about Miranda in this case, is that that's also an issue, too. You don't know what she has been telling her boyfriend all this time. If she's testifying like this, very detached, more alliances with Jimmy, there might have been times where she was saying to him that she had been a victim. It's a very, very convoluted type of situation of facts.
Yeah, certainly there's that weird codependence, I'm sure, between the abuser and the abused. So if you were going to retry this case.
Right, and the mother, don't forget about the mother.
She's a lamb that's following along.
There's so many characters involved.
Okay, quickly, before we go to a break
Yes.
here, what's the focus of the retrial if it happens? 10 seconds.
Well, second degree.
Okay.
And I focus on the recording. I focus on the statements that were made. I focus on bringing the gun. I focus on I even bring in premeditation, even though it's second degree.
Just to
and
heighten
this was
the
not
case.
self-defense.
Okay, let's see what they do. There's a hearing coming up on the 13th of next month to decide what's going to happen. This is the Law and Crime Network. Stay right where you are. A couple of great cases we're talking about, and a brand new case to begin in just an hour or so. Stay right where you are.